Good morning again, everyone. Welcome to our latest installment of Ripped from the Headlines, where we take news items from the recent newspapers or media outlets and try put a little bit of a Jewish spin on them. This morning, we're going to look at a topic which came out a couple of weeks ago and actually relates to last week was International Holocaust Remembrance Day and has a little bit of a Holocaust slant to it with regards to Anne Frank. And the subject has to do with, as you see in source number one, a headline from the Times of Israel 2 weeks ago. Anne Frank may have been betrayed by Jewish notary, new book claims. Right, we know that Anne Frank was in hiding. She and her family were hiding, and they were then caught and sent to the camps where she died shortly before the end of the war. And so, a cold case investigation led by an ex-FBI agent has identified a Jewish notary as the prime suspect in the mystery of who betrayed teenage diarist Anne Frank and her family to the Nazis. A new book claims. Arnold van den Berg may have revealed the Frank's hiding place in Amsterdam in order to save his own family, according to a 6-year probe detailed in The Betrayal of Anne Frank by Canadian author Rosemary Sullivan, which is to be published on Tuesday. The case against van den Berg, who died in 1950, supported by evidence including an anonymous note to Anne's father Otto after World War II, naming him as the betrayer, according to elements published in Dutch media today. The Anne Frank House Museum told AFP that the results of the probe led by retired Federal Bureau of Investigation Detective Vincent Pankow are a fascinating hypothesis, but needed further investigation. So this was the AFP report picked up by the Times of Israel that highlighted that the person who turned the Frank family in was a Jew trying to save his own family. And so to me, this started to bring to mind the idea of Jews turning in other Jews. There's a concept in Jewish law called Mesirah, which literally means giving over, Moser. Sometimes it's called, the Yiddish pronunciation is a Meiser, someone who turns in fellow Jews, a horrible offense, as we'll see in some of the Jewish sources later. At the same time, somewhat mitigated by the fact that it says here that this alleged betrayer did it to save his own family, and that too sparked a little bit of halachic interest into what happens when someone does things like this under duress. All halachic sources we will take a look at, but that's the headline. It was then reported the next day in the New York Times that scholars doubt new theory on Anne Frank's betrayal. David Barnew, the author of the 2000 book Who Betrayed Anne Frank, said he had also considered van den Berg as a suspect, but ruled him out because beyond the note, there was no evidence that he had played a role. Barnew was among several Dutch historians who voiced concerns about the findings of Van Twist's team. As part of the publisher's media strategy, the conclusions were not shared widely. Anyone who contributed to the investigation had to sign non-disclosure agreements, and the results were kept largely secret until a news blitz earlier this week, opening with a 60 Minutes television segment on Sunday. Many news organizations picked up the report uncritically, naming van den Berg as the betrayer without any expert response. Mail Online, the website of the British Daily Mail newspaper, ran the story with a headline beginning, Anne Frank was betrayed by a Jewish notary, making it a kind of a Jew-on-Jew headline. Emil Shriver, the director of Amsterdam's Jewish Culture Reporter, said he got an advance copy of the book late last week. The evidence is far too thin to accuse someone, he said. This is an enormous accusation that they made using a load of assumptions, but it's really based on nothing more than a snippet of information. By Tuesday, after experts on Anne Frank, World War II, and the Holocaust had a chance to consider the findings, many said they doubted the book's theory. All right, so the book comes out, and it's already being questioned. And then if we talk about being ripped from the headlines, this is right off, hot off the press yesterday, right? Dutch publisher stops printing copies of book alleging a Jew betrayed Anne Frank. This was a news report yesterday. Ambo Anthos, the Amsterdam-based publishing house that printed the Dutch language translation of a controversial book alleging that a Jew had betrayed Anne Frank, has apologized for not reviewing the material more critically and ceased printing new copies of it on Monday. I imagine we have not seen the end of the story and some of the backtracking and the like. So that is the story. That is there are all different angles to this story. Interesting how one headline puts the word Jewish in the biggest letters to make it a Jew turned into another Jew. Obviously, this is so, even if it was someone who turned in a fellow Jew, we could imagine it was these were the horrible times with tremendous pressures and the like. But we're going to take a look at this idea of Mesirah, a Jew turning in someone to the civil, secular authorities, and how that plays out, because it's, as we will see, it seems to be one of the worst possible crimes, and we have to understand its context as well as how does it play out today. What about turning a Jew into over into secular authorities for violating things? And if the prohibition still exists, when should we? When shouldn't we? Just maybe a less fraught example that I heard from someone giving a shiur on the subject. What happens if someone who's doing improper home designs, home renovations, that they're doing something that's they don't have a permit for? Can you turn them into the building inspector? Something that can, as we might call it, ma'asim b'chol yom, things which can happen any day. What about someone who speaks too much, or getting their license suspended? These are the types of issues that may not seem so serious, but do engage the halachic analysis of the subject of Mesirah or of being a moser. Before we jump into some of the halachic sources, any questions, comments, reactions, thoughts to the headline or the way we've introduced the issue? Okay, so the subject is introduced in a number of Gemaras, Gemara Baba Kama, Gemara in Gittin and elsewhere, and usually involves a situation where bandits, non-Jewish bandits, are threatening a Jew, and what would happen? The idea of to get them off, to shake away the bandits, to get them off your back, you point them in the direction of someone else, maybe a more promising target or a target that's not you. This is viewed as improper behavior. It's viewed as threatening behavior to the person you turn them towards. The rationale for this, has to do with the fact that if you're letting loose some potentially destructive attitudes, behaviors, danger towards another person, you are threatening the other person. You may not be holding the gun or the knife or the like, but you are letting it loose upon the other person, which makes it prohibited. As understood by the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, 13th century authority, source number 4, one who runs to inform so that Jewish money is given to a bandit, an anas is the bandit, is analogized by the rabbis to one who is running after a person to kill him. That's called the rodef. So this is seen from the verse in Isaiah, your children lie in a swoon at the corner of every street like an antelope caught in a net. Just like when an antelope is caught in a net, the hunter has no mercy towards it, so too the money of a Jew, once it falls into the hands of the bandits have no mercy on the Jew. They take some money today, tomorrow all of it, in the end they'll capture and kill him, since perhaps he has more money. Thus, an informer is like a pursuer to kill someone, and the victim may be saved at the cost of the life of the pursued. The idea being that just because someone comes to rob you, you point them in the direction of someone else to rob, say he has more money, go after him. Well, it's not just about the money they may initially take, it's about how they will continue or eventually take all of the money and then possibly violence and then kill him. And so the Rush goes as far as understanding the rationale for this, for the Moser as being similar to a rodef, right? A rodef is someone who is threatening to kill you, and you're allowed to kill a rodef. So an informer is like a pursuer to kill someone, and you could kill the person who is the Moser, essentially, right? Moser is not just letting loose some violence or someone to steal from another Jew. He's letting loose a possible cascade of violence, which will lead to the murder of someone else. So basically, the Moser is like a rodef, and a rodef pursuer can be stopped by killing him. So, A is B and B is C. Then what you do to B, you can do to A. And essentially, the rush opens the door to allowing one to kill the Moser. Right, the rush is introducing this in very specific cases, and with regard to bandits. But this is the beginning of, you have to be very careful, because once you let loose some violence, it can turn into a torrent and can lead to a horrific ending. So therefore, you shouldn't even go down that path in the beginning. It brings to mind this idea of the Ben Sorer Umoreh, the wayward son, as described in the Torah, right? Describes that the Talmud says that wayward son is someone who has too big an appetite and has to be killed. Why you put him to death? So the Talmud says al shem sofo, because of what happens. Because he has a big appetite. To support that appetite, he's going to have to steal. And if he's going to steal, he's going to steal more. And if he can't get what he wants, he's going to threaten. And there'll be violence and there'll be murder. So put the Ben Sorer Umoreh to death now, rather than go down that path of continued aggressive behavior culminating in violence and murder. Now, if it sounds a little extreme and harsh, it is. The Talmud also says that we probably never had a real Ben Sorer Umoreh. It's more of a theoretical construct to warn us against going down that bad path. Here we have a similar bad path we don't want a person to go down. Therefore, you can't turn over a Jew to a non-Jewish authority or direct the non-Jew in the direction of another Jew, because that is a Moser. And in practical halachic terms, this is discussed in Shulchan Aruch, source number 5. One is forbidden to hand a Jew to a non-Jew, be it his person or his money, even if the Jew is a rasha and a Baal Averot, right? Someone who is sinful. And even if the Jew is harassing him, even if he's a nuisance, right? So maybe take the on the face of it, the situation we gave, if someone is doing renovations on their home and they're making a lot of noise and it's not allowed, they don't have a permit. According to source number 5, it would seem to be that you're not allowed to hand a Jew over to a non-Jew. You're not able to rat the guy out, turn him over to the inspector because of that. Again, a much more innocent case than bandits leading to murder, but we're worried about the slippery slope that can we begin to go down when it comes to these types of situations. And the gravity of the situation of again, leaving aside what exactly is the danger to the Jew, to the Jew who you turn in, or to the Jew who you redirect the bandit towards, leaving aside whether there's actual danger or not, or major consequences, that seems to be besides the point. The construct as such is that turning over a Jew, putting a Jew in danger at the hands of a non-Jew, full stop. Just that, not without even having to define what the danger is viewed as a horrific crime, and is viewed as a major spiritual offense. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, source number 6, is describing, the various types of sinners and the types of repentance. Right, the idea that if a tzaddik and a rasha, the righteous is someone who's mostly majority of mitzvahs. The rasha is one who's majority of sins. And then they start talking about people who seem to be beyond the pale. So the Gemara says, source number 6, rebellious Jews who have sinned with their bodies, and also the rebellious people of the nations of the world who have sinned with their bodies, descend to Gehenna and are judged there for 12 months. Right, someone who's rebellious and doesn't repent, they're going to after they die, they go to Gehenna. After 12 months, their bodies are consumed, their souls are burned, and the wind scatters them under the soles of the feet of the righteous. Right, so they're that's it. They're completely eliminated, both physically, spiritually. But the heretics and the informers and the apostates, the apikorsim, and those who deny the Torah, those who deny the resurrection of the dead, those who separated from the ways of the Jewish community, refuse to share the suffering, those who cast their fear over the land of the living, and those who sin, cause massive sin, all these people descend to Gehenna and are judged there for generations and generations. Their punishment is eternal. So, you might think that rebellious Jews who sin don't end up so well because of their 12 months in Gehenna and then the complete scattering and consuming of their souls and bodies. Well, it's worse to be a heretic and an informer. Moser is even worse. So there's this reverberation of the seriousness or the heinous nature of the Moser. To such an extent that, look, this is the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah is describing things on a spiritual level. Shulchan Aruch, source number 7, recognizes that, look, if there is a Moser, well, Sefer Torah, Shekasvo Masur, right? Eved Isha Katan Kusi Yisrael Mumar Psulim. Talks about people who, if they write a Torah, it's not a kosher Sefer Torah. It has to be someone who's Jewish, can't be a minor, shouldn't be a woman who writes a Sefer Torah. But for our purposes, someone who's a Masur, someone who is turns in fellow Jews, that Torah is not a kosher Torah. It is possible, it has no sanctity whatsoever. So we see that the Moser is viewed from a spiritual perspective as someone who is, among the worst of the worst, and even in this world is really not considered a Jew. So much so, Shulchan Aruch, it is source number 8. It is permitted to kill a Moser even nowadays. The idea that this idea of even nowadays, the fact that we usually don't think about there being a death penalty anymore, and this is not about a death penalty. If someone is threatening to harm the Jewish community by being a Moser, by turning in a fellow Jew over to the authorities in a destructive fashion, endangering the Jewish community as a Moser, kill him. And Rabbi Chaim Jachter mentions in an article that this is not theoretical. This is what happened in the Jewish community. In his mid-20th, source number 9, his mid-20th century Talmud commentary, the Margoliot Hayom relates a bone-chilling episode that his father related to him as a child. In his hometown of Gradek, Poland, there was a violent and brazen Moser who one year entered the shul on Yom Kippur. The Moser stood wrapped in his tallis near the Rav when he was approached by a few men who grabbed him, used the tallis to gag the Moser's mouth. They brought him to the river and deposited him in the river. The Margolis Yom notes that not one of those present at the shul revealed what had happened when the local authorities investigated the cause of death. So this is not just a hypothetical. We go so far as saying you kill a Moser. Spiritually, practically, and even physically, a Moser does not deserve to live. Questions, comments, reactions. This would obviously not shield anyone from civil prosecution for committing this type of thing. I don't know, it kind of brings to mind the violence that we're allowed to do if a person is obligated to give their wife a get, and he does not. The Beis Din has the authority to makin oso actually omerotzani. You're allowed to beat him until he says he'll give in. And so this is what the tool that was at the Beis Din's disposal to force the get, and that's why they didn't have the type of aguna situations. Well, now we don't have that authority, and we do have aguna situations. And a number of years ago, there was a very famous case where a number of Orthodox Jews were arrested for engaging in this type of behavior and went to prison for it. So, but we see, at least in the Jewish sources describing the subject, how vile and heinous the crime of Mesirah is. And it's we don't really encounter this when it comes to other sins. It seems the very nature of a Jew turning on their fellow Jews by endangering them and turning them over to danger at the hands of the non-Jew, that person doesn't really even deserve to live. And that's what the Shulchan Aruch points out. And we see, at least in the case of the Margolios Hayom, was something that actually took place. There's kind of, I guess, some evidence, at least he heard the story from those who knew the story. No one was an eyewitness who was going on the record, but I think that's pretty extreme. In general, if you think about how difficult or how reluctant we are to impose a death penalty on a murderer, right? We talk about murder as a capital crime in Judaism, and that for which there's a death penalty if the witnesses testify the right way, etc. But we are unwilling to execute Right? The Talmud very famously says if there was an execution every 7 or maybe even every 70 years, that was considered a lot. That was considered bloody. Here, not only is it a situation where it's not the Beis Din involved, but here we have a situation of a Jew who still considered himself a Jew, who still went to Shul on Yom Kippur. Maybe he was not the nicest person in the world, but he went to Shul, and the religious establishment was okay with killing him for his Mesirah. So I think it's, calling someone a Moser, there's some of that. Those are fighting words, right? There's certain, there's certain insults which you better back up and mean, and not just throw out there because you're angry. And one of them is being a Moser. Questions, comments, reactions. I see Carla, your hand is up. Please unmute.
Hi. So Vandenberg was part of that Jewish council that the Nazis had set up, right, to manage the Jews for their purposes. Probably most of the Jews who joined it at the time didn't quite realize. Maybe some thought they could save themselves, and others probably thought they could save others. So when it's under duress, let's say.
Right.
So and look, did this also come up in the Inquisition, I imagine?
Right. So I want to cover the Moser issue in halacha and Jewish law first, and then go back to this. I don't think I would ever accuse anyone who's doing things under duress of being necessarily responsible for their sins. Certainly not Mesirah. And we will look at a couple of Holocaust examples that were addressed rabbinically, not to pass judgment on any of the cases or this case in particular. We know if someone has a gun to your head, it's going to be very different. Even if someone has a gun to your head and says, even when we're talking about the big 3 cardinal sins for which a hareg v'al yavor, you should be willing to die rather than transgress. We know the way the Rambam describes that is like, if someone puts a gun to your head and says, kill the other person or I'll kill you. That's a classic case where a person should be willing to be killed rather than kill. But if the person does kill, the Rambam says this is not a real sin with malice aforethought for which a person is liable. This is under duress. A person failed the test. We're human beings. We fail tests sometimes. But we'll get to a couple of examples. But I think the way you're thinking and connecting the cases, that was what I was wondering about. Is this Mesirah? Obviously, there's duress and the like, and we'll come to a couple of examples. But I think that first we're presenting the situation that being a Moser is pretty bad. You're burning in hell for all eternity. You're not really considered Jew when you're alive, and it's okay if we kill you. The Jews who never like to execute, is okay if we kill you for being a Moser. So I think that's it's important to highlight that. Yeah, and I think that it's time to pivot. So what about today? What about turning in the person who speeds consistently, or the person who's doing illegal renovations or the like, without specifically passing looking at those as necessarily halachic situations. Often there are other ways to address problematic behavior among the people who are close to us, whether we know them or they're our neighbors, before calling in the FBI. But it kind of also brings aside to mind, in terms of, does it make a difference who the authorities are? You notice that the original case is about a case of a bandit who wants to rob a Jew, and the Jew sends them in another direction to rob someone else. Don't rob me, rob the other person. So that begins to set in motion a whole cascading concern for further violence and further danger to the Jews. Okay, well, what if it's, what if that Mesirah action of turning someone in or turning someone over doesn't lead to anything difficult, right? We're talking about leading to danger and damage and destruction on the part of the action of going to the civil authorities. What if that's not the case? What if that's not the case? So I think that, that's where we begin to pivot, because, the Shulchan Aruch itself mentions, this is source number 10, that Kol HaMusar HaTzibur UMitza'aran, someone who is a threat to the community, Mutar LaMasro Bi'adakum, you are allowed to turn them over. Avo Mipnei Tsar Yachid Asur LaMasro, there's a difference, right? This whole discussion, the Shulchan Aruch says, if someone's harassing me, if someone's putting me in danger, the bandits are coming to me, I can't turn them over to you. And that's considered moser, and I have to be stopped. And then all of the different ramifications, all the different consequences emerge. But if, let's say, there's a person who's causing trouble for everyone, well, that person should be stopped, and that person can be stopped even by using the authorities. Right? So there's a certain hierarchy of danger and potential damage and destruction that we're concerned with. And if someone is a threat to the community, the way to stop that person as being a threat to the community is turn them into the authorities. That's not the same thing as Mesirah. And here we come to really a major distinction that's introduced by the Aruch HaShulchan, Rabbi Chil Michalevsky in the Vardak, turn to the 20th century, source number 11, that Mesirah is turning the person over to a kind of a situation where they're known to be bandits, right? You can't turn Jews over to criminals. You can't turn Jews over to people who will endanger them. But you can't turn Jews over to non-Jews in period at all became the halacha. But what if the non-Jews are civil? What if there's decency? What if there's order? What if there's authorities and it's a democratically elected government? So here the Aruch HaShulchan chimes in with a very important view, which really reshapes how we understand Mesirah today. As is widely known in times of old, in places far away, no person had any assurance in the safety of his life or money because of the pirates and bandits, even if they took upon themselves the form of a government. It is known that this is true nowadays in some places in Africa, where the government itself is grounded in theft and robbery. One should remind people of the kingdoms in Europe, and particularly our ruler, the Tsar and his predecessors, and the kings of England, who spread their influence over many lands in order that people should have confidence in the security of their body and money. The wealthy do not have to hide themselves so that others will not loot or kill them. On all of this, the presence of looting and killing hinges the rules of informing, of the Moser and the Malshin, informing and slandering, in the Talmud and later authorities, as I will explain. These rules apply only to one who informs on another, to bandits, and so endangers the person's money and life, as these bandits chase the person's body and money, and thus may use deadly force to save one. One may use deadly force to save oneself from these bandits. But again, the key word is that the presence of the looting and the killing and among the authorities, that you turn the fellow Jew over, that's where we're worried about being a moser. That's where we're about informing. That's where we're worrying about slandering to the government. He's talking about, I imagine he has a nice word to say for the Tsar, because he probably had to deal with the Tsar. But he's pointing out, in governments that are concerned with law and order and are not really they're not meant to be, governments that are there for, what do they call them? Kleptocracies, right? Governments that try to steal from the people illegally, or persecuting or prosecuting people illegally. There's law and order, and the whole concept of Moser falls apart. And that, I think, is a major difference in terms of Mesirah, the idea of a Moser, and the idea of how terrible the sin is, and how spiritually and theologically problematic it is, how practically it removes the Jew from being a full member of a Jewish community. Can't write a Torah scroll, for example. Or the fact that we're even going to go so far as to say kill the Moser. That's when the Moser is doing the Mosering in a situation that leads to even worse consequences. But in a situation where it is a reasonable government, then that doesn't apply. And as Rabbi Herschel Schachter notes in an article addressing the subject of the law of the land, source number 12, a Moser is one who aids a pirate, a crooked government official, or a tyrant king to obtain money illegally from his fellow Jew. Even if the Jew has actually done something wrong, but if the secular government or ruler would exact a punishment far beyond that which crime should require, then it is likewise forbidden to report it. If, however, the government is entitled to its taxes or is permitted to punish criminals as offenders, there's no problem of Mesirah in telling the government information needed for them to collect their taxes or to apprehend their man. One critical point should, however, be added. There is no problem, Mesirah, informing the government of a Jewish criminal, even if they penalize the criminal with a punishment more severe than the Torah requires, because even a non-Jewish government is authorized to punish and penalize above and beyond the law, shalom min hadin, for the purpose of maintaining law and order. However, this applies only in the situation when the Jewish offender or criminal has at least violated some Torah law. But if he did absolutely nothing wrong in the eyes of the Torah, then giving him over to the government would constitute a violation of Mesirah. So here Rav Schachter follows the lead set out by the Aruch HaShulchan that when you're dealing with governments of law and order, it's not a problem the same way of Mesirah. But he does add this caveat that there has to be something wrong in the eyes of the Torah. And in general, when looking at this subject, if we were doing a deeper dive into the responses written about the subject of Mesirah, there are more views which basically wholeheartedly and full-throatedly endorse the Aruch HaShulchan and basically say there's no Mesirah today in a place where there's a regular government of law and order. And then you'll have those who point out some possible qualifications in the eyes that there's no Mesirah if the government will not punish more than the Torah. So Rav Schachter says it's okay for governments to have a stricter penalty than the Torah or than Jewish law would mete out. But others say no. If the secular law is more severe, the consequences than Jewish law, then you're not allowed to turn the person to the government. This case came up. Rav Moshe Feinstein addresses a question. Someone wants to know if they're allowed to work for the IRS, because working for the IRS would mean, identifying people who weren't paying their taxes. That was the position of being an IRS investigator, and he would have to therefore turn Jews in to the IRS. And the question was, is that considered Mesirah? So, we're not going to analyze Rabbi Feinstein's analysis. No, Rabbi Feinstein has a more conservative, small c approach to Mesirah and is still more concerned about being a moser to secular authorities. Some could say, Rabbi Feinstein's experience with secular governments, involved spending decades under communism before coming to the United States. So it could be that influenced, it made him a little bit more suspicious of secular governments and therefore more concerned with Mesirah. But so you have run the gamut. But the last line that Rav Schachter mentions, if he did absolutely nothing wrong in the eyes of the Torah, then giving him over to the government would constitute a violation of Mesirah. First off, this is what leads certain rabbis. This was the opinion, for example, of Rabbi Elyashiv in Israel. We shouldn't be so quick to assume there's no Torah violation. People say, "Oh, the Torah will be okay with this." Not so fast. First off, there is something called Chil Hashem, desecration of God's name. So if any type of behavior that would present badly upon Jews or Judaism is a Chil Hashem, then pretty much any bad behavior that a Jew engages in can lead to a Chil Hashem. So there's probably something wrong in the eyes of the Torah for any bad behavior that a Jew would engage in. And in fact, some people do go so far as that and say, look, if a Jew is engaging in behavior that will reflect badly on Judaism, Chil Hashem, basically, so there's, in countries that are countries of law and order, there's no Mesirah whatsoever. But even if you wanted to say certain things don't have a Torah prohibition, you can't just say that glibly and off the cuff. It requires proper analysis. This especially has come up with regards to some of the, the types of behavior that take place, for teachers behaving badly or what the different issues relating to sexual abuse in the Orthodox community. They're saying, we don't know for sure if the crime was committed, so maybe we can't go to the secular authorities just yet. And it's unfortunate that the severity of Mesirah has sometimes led to walls going up and people being more reluctant to go to the secular authorities. What we've been pointing out is we've shown how that was constructed. That severity of Mesirah is very much a part of how Jews approach turning relationship with the secular authorities. And you could say, therefore, for most of our history, we've been dealing with governments that were not governments of law and order that we needed to be concerned with. And it really has been the last 130 years or so where there's been more of an opportunity to abide by what the Aruch HaShulchan is saying, of having the ability to, or the confidence to recognize that turning Jews over for misdeeds will not lead to problems or harm for that Jew or the Jewish community writ large, but is really part of creating a better, just society for everybody. And so that began to change things, and we see that Rosh Hashanah endorses that pivot made by the Aruch HaShulchan. And we mentioned that there are more conservative views and more expansive views. It certainly would seem that any bad behavior that was done by a Jew is Chil Hashem, and therefore turning them over to a government of law and order would seem to be fine. And of course, as always, more to investigate and more to explore in the details of the situation. But for the most part, we've seen that this terrible crime of Mesirah certainly weighs heavily on the mind of the Jew living in a non-Jewish world, casting a certain amount of suspicion on the non-Jewish authorities. Times are changing, and Jewish attitudes and halacha can likewise adapt. But it's not surprising that there's still that suspicion, and certainly the way we've seen some in the more orthodox communities respond to government declarations in these last couple of years, as we grapple with COVID, it's part and parcel of how we relate to non-Jewish governmental authorities, considering their track record in our history. And Mesirah is another example of that. Questions, comments, or reactions before we look at a couple of case studies from the show up? Okay. So
I have a question, Rabbi.
Sure, Al. What's
It's hypothetical because it's never happened to me or anybody I know. A person learns that a member of the congregation who's attending services is not vaccinated, as the requirements of the synagogue are. The question is, should or should he not report them?
Well, I think I'm not sure the case is necessarily analogous because we don't have vaccine mandates that's illegal to be unvaccinated. We have policies that places are trying to abide by, to maintain a certain amount of confidence and participation. So I don't think, the question is, who do you tell? If you know someone's not vaccinated and you know that they should be because of the situation, then you should tell them you shouldn't be here if you're not vaccinated, and that's the rule. Someone mentioned to me a situation where he went shopping in a supermarket where they wanted him to show a vaccine card to enter. And he says, I don't have it, I'm going in anyway. And they said, we're going to call the police. So that case, you have a little bit more of a real law and order situation. So I'm not sure a person being in the synagogue not vaccinated is directly analogous. But in general, I think if a person is doing something wrong, I think that they should be they should be told what they're doing is wrong, or at least you should tell them you think what they're doing is wrong, and then try to deal with the situation. One of the conversations that takes place around this issue, and it came up in the class someone was giving about the scofflaw home improvements. Does the first call need to be to a building inspector or authorities? Why not have a conversation with the person? So I think that's I don't know if that's necessarily a halachic issue. It's something in the realm of common sense. That when trying to, it's all about conflict resolution, right? Generally, conflict resolution is not achieved by raising the temperature and calling out the troops and calling in the big guns as the first salvo. Usually you try to resolve it more amicably and privately first.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Should our synagogue require vaccination, in your opinion?
Look, I think that what I believe is that moshels should be. I think moshels are either requiring vaccination or requiring people who are not vaccinated to wear masks. look, I think right now, if I'm not mistaken, today's the last day of New York governor's ruling throughout the state that places of gathering have to either require masks or require proof of vaccine. Now, this was a bit of a controversial state mandate in New York, because many of the county executives, both Democrat and Republican, said that they weren't necessarily going to enforce this so carefully. But that's the if that so that actually was discussed in terms of what happens when there is a law of the land that no one is interested in enforcing. Is that still the law of the land or not? I think at this point in our COVID climate, we're reaching a point that hopefully that for the most part, those who are vaccinated are vaccinated. Those who aren't should. Those who aren't and are not interested in getting it probably won't. And we're going to have to get back to normal somehow. And I think that for people to take the right precautions for themselves, assuming that not everyone around them is doing the right thing, that's what we do in life before COVID, right? That's how we've always adjusted to life, right? Make sure that you do the best you can, but when you get on the road, you can't assume everyone's going to be as careful a driver as you are. So I think that I think we may have forgotten the fact that when there were other issues or other threats to our well-being, we navigated them. So we'll navigate COVID the best of our ability too, by continuing to encourage vigilance and people taking appropriate precautions. Getting vaccinated seems to be the best way to minimize any type of danger here. Among the people I know, I think I have a pretty much 95+% circle of individuals who are vaccinated. So that's it's not yet 100, but I think we're for many people we're getting closer and closer to that threshold, and we'll continue to learn more. People who have it, when they recover, they also have a type of immunity, and maybe we'll look. At some point, getting for certain demographics of people, getting hit by a car is more likely than dying from COVID these days. So we're making progress.
Rabbi, do I understand you to say that the shul should not require vaccination to be admitted into the synagogue?
Right now, the shul's policy is to come to shul. You have to show proof of vaccination to come to pray at services. And people have submitted that or have been asked for that, and then that's where we're at. No one has yet volunteered to stand at the door and ask people for their status directly and to physically bar those who aren't. Are you volunteering?
No.
All right. So I think that look, mandates are not easy, Al. We live in a country that believes in freedom of choice.
Seatbelts are not easy. Red lights are not easy.
As we
This is
discussed,
is just as dangerous.
I think
people are dying from COVID.
I think seatbelts is a great example. The fact that the fact that people almost universally are wearing seatbelts now. Look, right. We've done pretty well in 2 years. We've gotten some 70-80% of people to get vaccinated. If you give us another 50 years, we might be in the same place as seatbelts.
Yeah. If it's up to Fox News, nobody will be vaccinated.
Huh?
According to Fox News, it's not necessary.
I don't know. I'm not. I can't can't watch all the news channels all day.
Well,
but it's a good look. People's behavior has definitely changed on seatbelts. But who knows? Look, if we give it enough time, it may change on other things also. But so let's
Hashem.
That's progress. So let's move back. Let's pivot to the case studies. Carla mentioned the idea, started to introduce, well, if this guy did turn in Anne Frank, is that Mesirah? And of course, there's duress and the like. And, but I want to look at two cases, and they're situations where people, the first one is where a person was able to save themselves, but by saving themselves, they're definitely putting someone else at risk, or they're basically putting someone in line to die. So source number 13 is from Rabbi Ephraim Oshri, who survived the Holocaust. He was a rabbi in the Lower East Side. and he has published a number of works of response. And he was very famously he and a few other rabbis were well known for being rabbis who asked shilas in the Holocaust. Now, suffice it to say that there were Jews asking shilas in the Holocaust is pretty incredible, and it's part of the spiritual resistance and survival of the Jewish people from these types of situations. But he was asked, may it be whether it's permissible to save oneself and cause another person to be killed. Right? So this is not Mesirah per se, but if I get to live, then I'm causing you to die. So I was asked in the Kovna Ghetto that there was a commander for ghetto affairs in Kovna, had given the Council of Elders 5,000 white cards, which were to be distributed among the craftsmen and their families, and only those who had cards would remain. At the time, there were almost 30,000 Jewish souls in the ghetto, among them about 10,000 craftsmen and their families. There was a great tumult. Those who were stronger snatched the cards from the Altenstrat. And now the question is whether it's permissible for the Altenstrat to take the cards and distribute them amongst the craftsmen in accordance with the orders of Jordan. There's the general's name. And the second question is whether it's permissible for the craftsmen to snatch these cards and to push away their comrades among the craftsmen who will remain over and above the number of 5,000 cards. What will be with them? So can you grab one? And also, if you're the council, can you distribute them? And by distributing the card to some people and not others, you're causing them to die. So it is possible to say that in these cases, all the craftsmen are since partners in all the cards, for it is conceded that they were given for all of them, and therefore all have a share in them. And if so, then each one may snatch who has a share in them, right? They belong to all of them, all of these craftsmen, so they're yours. Unfortunately, they're not enough for everybody, so only some of the partners will get. Later, I heard from the revered Rabbi Edi Shapiro, the head of the Rabbinical Court of Kovna, when the order went out, the Altenstrat, that it should post a notice that all the occupants of the ghetto be assembled in the Demokraten Platz. The Altenstrat came to ask the Rabbinical Court what they should do in accordance with the laws of the Torah, for it was known that a great part of those who assembled would be doomed to die. So if they called for people to assemble, they would be indirectly causing people to die. After he considered the matter, the head of the Rabbinical Court ruled as follows. If the order was made that a community in Israel be destroyed, and if by some means it was possible to save a small part of the people, then the heads of the community must gather up courage in their souls, and it is their responsibility to act and to save who may be saved. And therefore, in this case, it appears that taking and distributing the permits is also a matter of rescue. It's not appropriate to rule in this case according to the law for an individual, and therefore the Altenstrat is required to accept the permits and to distribute them. And so, you have a case where basically they were granting permission for the Altenstrat to give out the cards to those who they could, and depriving those who they couldn't, and those who did not have the cards would then be executed. So I think that we see that when there is a certain chayecha kodmin is the expression that your life comes first in dealing with some of these situations that really have that are impossible to really solve. Right? There's no good answer here, and I think that this idea of being under duress clearly is relevant. And again, the fact that they're actually thinking halachically to begin with is in many ways heroic. Speaking of that type of heroism, this was an article that appeared in a book by Irving Rosenbaum, and Yitzhak Adlerstein summarizes it in source number 14. The Nazi commandant of Auschwitz purged a camp of all teenage boys who were not tall and strong enough to work. The victims of the selection were herded together in a special cell block without food or drink, understanding they would be sent to the crematoria the next evening. So a father turned to Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Meisels for a halachic decision. The father had valuables hidden, which he could bribe the guards to release his son. Should he do that, another boy would have to be snatched to replace the one who was missing, since an exact count had already been taken. Was it permissible to do so? He was ready to submit to any decision rendered by the rabbi, right? So he can save his son, but saving his son will mean someone else will die. So Rabbi Meisels implored the man not to ask him the question. How could he decide on such a weighty matter in the hell of Auschwitz without consulting texts or colleagues? A matter of life and death required the sitting of a Sanhedrin to decide. The father insisted. Rabbi Meisels was just as firm in his reluctance. The next day, the man returned. Rabbi, I have done what the Torah has obligated me to do. If you cannot tell me that I may ransom my child, it's a sign that your own mind, you're not certain that the halacha permits it. So for me, your evasion is tantamount to a psak din, a clear decision. I am forbidden to do so. I accept God's decree with love and with joy. I'll do nothing to ransom him at the cost of another innocent life, for so the Torah has commanded. Right? The rabbi did not give that answer. That's how the father internalized it, and that's how he reacted. Obviously, a very emotional and a very moving and complex type of a story. But again, highlighting both the fact that halacha and halachic reasoning was part and parcel for many Jews during the Shoah, and created impossible dilemmas, but also created heroes out of those who were trying to deal with these dilemmas. And so obviously, the passing judgment on anyone in these situations is impossible, but certainly to recognize how complicated those times were, but also see the fact that people were struggling and grappling with halachic responses to those times definitely is a powerful way to recall the Shoah and the heroism of those who lived it, and also those who survived it. So that is our discussion this morning. I'm sure the Anne Frank story will continue to play out for a little bit, and we'll hear maybe other people won't want to print the book and more controversy. And the role of Mesirah as anything other than maybe an insult of calling someone a Mesir, maybe less these days where most of us are living in places of law and order, but that will open up new complexities and new opportunities for further study.